Dear friends, we gather this afternoon to remember the life of one who filled our world with his love, his goodness, his extraordinary spirit, and remarkable example. In humility and gratitude, we turn to the wisdom of our tradition for comfort, for guidance, and we pray for understanding. Throughout the centuries, our people have said, Esa'inai el heharim, I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Esa'inai el heharim, me'ayin, me'ayin, Yavo Ezri. I lift up my eyes unto the mountains, from where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and of earth. Ezri me'im Adonai, say shamayim v'aretz. I lift up my eyes unto the mountains, from where will my help come? Esa'inai el heharim, me'ayin, me'ayin, Yavo Ezri. Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold the upright. They shall have peace. For those of you for whom the 23rd Psalm is familiar, I invite you to join with me in its recitation. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. When I die, remember me with a smile and laughter. If thoughts of me provoke no love, only sadness and tears, I ask that I be soon forgotten. Give what's left of me away to children and old ones who wait to die. And if you must cry, cry for your brother or sister who walks in grief beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. You can love me most by letting love live within the circle of your arms. embracing the frightened ones. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. My dear Beverly, Dan, Dina, Deborah, David, dear Barbara, Kevin, Rob, Stephen, dear family, friends. We gather this afternoon in profound sadness, shock, and even disbelief. We knew this day must come. For years, we have been steeling ourselves against its inevitability. We have watched in anguish as Jeff's illness progressed. And yet, these last weeks were filled with activity as he drove to Columbus for Theo's 4th birthday, as he was in Cincinnati for the wedding of a dear longtime friend, as he celebrated his own 55th birthday just a few weeks ago. We never imagined the end was so near. We never imagined he could just stop breathing. Even with what we thought was years of preparation, this day comes as a shock to our souls. If only Jeff were here. He would give form and focus to our grief. He would write it and rhyme it. He would turn it into poetry or literary reflection. He would compose our sorrow into something meaningful, sing it into something beautiful. If only Jeff were here. He would understand the depth of our anguish, the empty place inside, the darkness that fills us, where his light used to be. He would know what we need. The guiding word, the compassionate heart, the helpful book, the healing song, the diversion of an indie movie, a new show, a game. If only Jeff were here. Even as his illness robbed him and us of so much of him, the alchemy of his presence made everything better. And somehow, with all his challenges, and cognizant of the inexorable deterioration of his illness, he made us laugh in his crazy, offbeat, even oddball way. Whatever the circumstances, he found something to lighten the mood, to lift our spirits, to make us smile. The more he was diminished physically, the more his spirit seemed to soar, as he taught us, each of us, how to embrace this life with passion and commitment, how to take advantage of every opportunity to learn, to enjoy, to experience, to share, and how to transcend the limitations of the material world for the always rich and always welcoming world of the mind, the imagination, the creative impulse. He inspired us. He uplifted our everyday. He encouraged and supported us, and because he loved, cared about, and was always there for us, he made us feel important, worthy, appreciated. He was the best of us, pure essence of humanity, when so little else was left. He was unusual, unique, a singular human being in his interests and abilities. As Barbara pointed out and his brothers concur, he was a contemporary Renaissance man. There wasn't anything he didn't know or couldn't do. One had only to ask him a question about history, philosophy, politics, culture, math, science, religion, literature. It was remarkable. There seemed to be virtually nothing he didn't know something about. From his earliest years, he loved to read, loved to learn, and always wanted to know more about any subject he might come across. He consulted guides to help him build a personal library of the world's most important books, classic books, and greatest literary masterpieces. He did the same with recordings, as he somehow became an expert in every musical genre, from classical to jazz to rock and roll to new wave, new age, rock, punk, R&B, country, even camp songs. He knew every style and the repertoire of each. He played piano by ear and with music, and managed to play some kind of percussion instrument for the marching band in high school. If he wanted to do something, he just did it. He had the confidence to try just about anything and laugh at himself if he wasn't very good. The one skill he seems not to have had was athletic ability, even before he was stricken with MS. And yet he went out for football and wrestling with little success, but maintained a lifelong love of sports and sporting events, even if it meant doggedly and excruciatingly for those of us who witnessed his effort, dragging his body up the stadium stairs to his seat. He went kayaking and whitewater rafting with Beverly and his family. He went paracycling in Mexico, in all cases with advanced MS, but he wanted to try. He wanted the experience. As Barbara and the family all acknowledged, he had an appetite for life that would not be denied because of the inconveniences of a chronic, debilitating disease. Jeff would not be defined by the disease. There was way too much in this life to learn, to see, to hear, to experience, to embrace. There was too much fun to have, too much music to hear, too many areas to explore, such as the philosophy and practice of ancient Far Eastern traditions. The world was endlessly fascinating to Jeff, which meant that he was not only constantly absorbing huge amounts of information and developing expertise in diverse disciplines, he was so excited by most of what he studied that he loved to share his knowledge with others. Did you need a song, a musical example, a certain style or genre? He had a recording to share with you. Did you need some kind of information? He knew exactly what you were asking, where to look, and what resources to utilize. He had term papers for his brothers, a shared love of music to explore endlessly with his son, David. He was not an easy child to raise. It's not that he wasn't obedient, as he was, except that he could never manage to be at the dinner table at 6 o'clock as his father expected. But his mind was so active and so agile that it was hard to keep up with him or to exert some kind of control over the suitability of subjects, sources, and opinions for a child, brilliant as he might be. From the outset, he seemed to look at life from a unique perspective, differently from the rest of us. Barbara once asked him how he felt about being the eldest of 4 brothers. He replied without hesitation, "Mom, every couple of years, you go into the hospital and bring me home another brother." I thought that was a way of life. As a young child, he sat at the piano and played every childhood song. As a 13-year-old teenager, he traveled abroad with his grandpa, Lurie, after his grandmother, Edith, passed away. They went to theater in London together, to Greece and to Israel. And family lore maintains that Jeff visited a strip joint somewhere in his travels. His grandfather let him explore on his own, and Jeff was perfectly happy going all over strange cities by himself. It was such an unusual thing to do, to travel with his grandfather at such a young age. But Jeff was remarkably inclusive, accepting, and embracing. And because he was, those he might be with followed his lead. He thought nothing of taking 5th grader Rob to rock concerts out at Blossom with his high school friends. Blossom was a special place for Jeff. Steve has a most vivid memory of him dancing wildly to the song Rosalita at a Bruce Springsteen concert. He was there with his family and having the most wonderful, crazy time. Jeff, before his illness, was a blur of activity. He rode his bicycle all over the city, often because his parents required that he stayed on the sidewalk. In order to get to the old neighborhood in Mayfield Heights, for example, That rule required a great deal of creative routing. He was similarly creative when it came to driving. The indescribable Toyota, it seems. As in Jeff's mind, there was no such thing as driving directly from point A to point B. If there were traffic circles involved, one had to do a complete 360-degree drive of the roundabout. Or, absent that completion, there were hand motions out the window that needed to be observed in order to make the proper turn. He was a great camp counselor, as he was endlessly inventive and wonderfully fun. Kevin remembers how he managed as a student at Beechwood High School and as the editor of the school paper to have an office in the building. He was in all kinds of activities, including theater, music, and clubs. As a participant in the Junior Council on World Affairs, Kevin remembers him at a meet at Georgetown University, where he commanded the room and the council as he represented Indonesia with absolute knowledge of and advocacy for his assigned country. He would eat the strangest, most bizarre foods as part of his fascination with the world and the diversity of experiences available to us. He never met a joke he couldn't take further and play longer, and he had endless capacity for laughing at himself first and foremost. When it was time to go to college, his brothers helped him return bundles of books and records to the library. As far as we know, he never returned to his mother her complete set of Shakespeare's works. He was the acknowledged smartest of the family who unknowingly and inadvertently ruined things for his brothers. He loved Fairmont Temple Religious School, and it never occurred to him not to go on to confirmation and graduate from our Temple High School. He thus created the expectation for all of the Lurie boys to graduate from our high school, and I remember them each doing so. He entered Miami of Ohio with a bunch of advanced placement credits, and upon graduation, went immediately to law school at The Ohio State University. Barbara described him as living his life on fast forward, and how grateful we are now that he did. He seemed to live fully and completely at every moment, totally engaged, interested in taking advantage of every experience and every interaction. As college roommate and eventual law partner Josh Davidson related, Jeff graduated from Miami in 1985 and proceeded to law school at The Ohio State University. Very few of his friends knew he had also been accepted to Vanderbilt, but elected to attend OSU instead. I visited him for the first 4 days of the NCAA basketball tournament in 1986. We watched basketball games all day in marathon fashion, including an entire day at Damon's restaurant, where we watched a dozen games on multiple big screen televisions. Jeff rocketed toward the top of his law school class during the next 2 academic years and landed a judicial clerkship for Ohio's 11th District Court of Appeals. He adored the job. The judge for whom he clerked published numerous decisions that Jeff authored, mostly without revision. To graduate from Miami in 1987, I had to finish a research paper about 2 Alfred Hitchcock films. The night before it was due, I spoke with Jeff on the telephone for more than 3 hours. He had read my entire bibliography, and I had not. So I essentially interviewed him, and he gave me all the critical analysis I required for the A. In 1989, while I resided in California, Jeff moved to Cincinnati for a position at the law firm Harris & Harris. In 1990, I returned to Cincinnati to attend law school at the University of Cincinnati. I missed the first week of classes due to an illness. I struggled with property law and could not seem to catch up from the missed week, despite double vision from an MS flare-up that required him to wear an eye patch. Jeff spent countless hours tutoring me and saving my grade. He was the best law professor I ever had. Most of his hypotheticals involved the Brady Bunch. He induced his law firm to hire me as a summer clerk in 1991. I helped him prepare a motion for certification of a class action. He treated me like a colleague rather than a clerk and went out of his way to demonstrate his appreciation. In 1993, he testified as an expert witness for me in my trial practice mock trial. Strong witness. Somehow, with the onset of his illness, at about the same time he started law school, with the demands of law school and then of his career, he found time to actualize another of his passions as he taught literacy to disadvantaged youth and then to adults. Whenever he could, he encouraged his students to read books that he could then discuss with them, particularly in online conversations. While Jeff would have been perfectly happy to ignore the progress of his disease and to pursue his career in an uninterrupted manner, given that his mind, judgment, expertise, and compassion for others did not suffer, the advent of illness seemed to bring with it attendant, unexpected, and often undeserved challenges. His illness proved to be a disqualifier for one firm. At another firm, Jeff found the new security measures instituted after 9/11 to make it virtually impossible for him to enter the building, and he had to move on once again. He moved from Cincinnati to Cleveland in 2003 to be near his family as his illness progressed, only to lose his father, Buddy, within months of moving back. He seemed not to be able to catch a break once the disease was diagnosed. Every time he seemed to reach a new plateau and prayed to be allowed to remain there, a new flare-up would leave him further disabled. Every time he found a new situation in which to practice, some unforeseen development would make his continued employment untenable. And yet, as Josh Davidson witnessed, Jeff's illness robbed him of so much. He loved long walks and playing piano. He loved practicing law. He loved playing with his children, and he looked forward to playing with his grandchildren. Yet in the more than 30 years since he became ill, I never once heard him complain about it. I never once heard him lament being cheated of joy. Instead, I heard him revel in his blessings. Jeff was one of the most intelligent and erudite people I have ever known. Anyone who ever played Trivial Pursuit or watched Jeopardy with him will agree. He had a ridiculous vocabulary and a voracious love for learning. He is one of the finest attorneys I have ever known. He was prone to romanticism. He loved his family above all else, and he had many passions. Like all of the Luries, he had a wicked and sardonic sense of humor. Moreover, Jeff could always one-up the sickest joke you could possibly tell or hear. He once described a mutual acquaintance as watermelon rind. Why? Because the person lacked any redeeming qualities or utility. He made me laugh as hard as I have ever laughed, and that is a gift I will treasure forever. Around the same time he was teaching me property law, he met Bev, the love of his life. Jeff knew immediately he had found his soulmate in Bev, and in more than 27 years, he never once shared with me even a constructive criticism of her. He loved her as profoundly as possible and spoke about her only with adoration. I can't begin to comment eloquently enough about Bev's devotion to Jeff. As Alana pointed out, it is not possible to overstate Beverly's constancy, her care, support, compassion, and dedication, her role as protector, advocate, helper, and guardian angel. In the Renaissance Man's Guide to Fast-Forward Living, Beverly became Jeff's wife and brought a whole family with her as Jeff joyfully and gratefully welcomed Dan and the twins, Dina and Deborah, into his life. When David followed a few years later, life seemed very sweet and filled with potential. David was named for his grandfather, Barbara's father, David Freimer, whose widow, Sylvia Freimer, lived into her 90s. She lived to see the beginning of her eternity as the entire family rejoiced when Kevin married Alana and brought Lexi, Taylor, and Dylan into this world. When Steve met Amy and welcomed Noah and Joey, and Rob married Jamie 15 years ago, and now have Josh and Sean. Jeff loved his family with a deep and abiding passion for every one of them. He adored his brothers, probably adored even more the outstanding women they married, as Alana, Amy, and Jamie joined the family, with Jamie and Amy nicknaming the family the Beaver Cleavers, as they gathered every Sunday evening, and most often on Friday nights. They all know how lucky they are to be part of such a close, loving, and supportive family, to live in one city, for all of the first cousins to be able to grow up knowing each other and being adored by their Uncle Jeff, and for Barbara to have the great joy, fulfillment, and gratification of having her family all around her. The close and close-by family was a great gift to Jeff, as it is to you all. Jeff loved his family and was the family historian of places, relationships, and stories no one else knew. He loved his grandparents' parents and was devoted to his mother, Barbara. His brothers were true brothers of blood, heart, and soul. His sisters-in-law were likewise without hyphens in his mind, as true sisters of his heart, while nephews and nieces enjoyed the same status. But of all the relationships that he enjoyed in this world, and of the very few regrets he might have had, it was his immediate family that he cherished beyond measure, and for whom he would have wished more time. To share with Dan the details of his life in California and the nature of his work with computers. To share in the joy of Dina and Nick's growing family with Theo and Sophia, as well as Deborah and Travis's brood of Luca and Samuel and David. How can we possibly reflect all that David did for him on a daily, sometimes hourly basis? We cannot begin to imagine the support that Jeff needed and that Dave provided him. As Josh Davidson once again reflected, over the past several years, he derived unbridled pride and joy from watching his son David develop as a musician. I wish he could have played more music with David. And David, your father could really play. Your music will be a continuing tribute to his memory, and I am certain he will be listening as your greatest fan. There is no question in any of our minds that Beverly was the queen of his soul, who reigned supreme in his heart. For almost 27 years, they were partners, lovers, teammates, and friends, and Beverly was even more in order to make life possible for both of them. Neither of them ever complained or felt sorry for themselves or decried their fate. On the contrary, they both felt fortunate for the gifts they had been given and the blessings they enjoyed. In recognition of the goodness his family all experienced, Jeff wrote a poem entitled The Perpetual Mitzvah, in which he outlined in a long and detailed fashion the wonderful events that were always happening to the family, despite losses and disappointments, setbacks and suffering. Even in his passing, he guides us to reflect on the gifts of our lives, chief among which was and will now always be the fast-forward, perpetual mitzvah, Renaissance man, Zichrono Livracha, whose memory we pray will be always for blessing, as we say, Amen. I call now on his children, David, Dina, and Debbie, to offer their reflections of their father.
I want to start by saying thank you all for coming to celebrate the life of my father. I remember being here over 10 years ago for the funeral of my grandfather, I remember listening to the speeches that were given that day and wondering how anyone could bear to laugh on what was such a sad occasion. As I stand here today, older and more mature, I understand that we are here not only to grieve, but to celebrate the life of my father. My dad had no shortage of pity thrown his way, but those who knew him know that he never felt pity for himself. Growing up, it was obvious to me what an impact he made on the lives of those he knew. Whether it was getting to know his close friends, Alan and Wendy, who became like extra aunt and an uncle to me, or hearing the countless stories his brothers and mother have shared at our family dinners, my father was a special man. But today I have a story that only I can tell, a story that defines who my dad was as a person and what he meant to me. When I was in high school, my parents and I lived in an apartment together, just the three of us. At this young age, I often felt jaded and angry. I was going to school with kids I perceived to have been dealt a much easier hand than I. My mother, as a nurse who would work nights so oftentimes, would just be my dad and I at home. Occasionally, he would have a rough patch and be in and out of the hospital. One night when he returned home, we were sitting in his bedroom, just the two of us, listening to music, as we often would. I decided to ask him that night if he too felt angry and upset about what his illness had done to his life. And he said to me, without a moment of hesitation, that he considered himself lucky to have met my mother. It was after hearing those words that my life changed forever. I realized that I was the luckiest kid in the world. Every day I got to experience the true meaning of love and the lengths of which you go to help the ones you care about. My mother and father are the strongest people I have ever met and are the single biggest inspiration in my life. In a too often cruel world, my parents taught me empathy and compassion, and how, to quote a lyric of my father's, "In love, our hearts become the same." Thank you for listening to my story. I hope when you remember my father, you remember how full of love for everyone he was, and I know that I will never forget how grateful I am to be his son.
I also want to thank you all for being here. For those of you that traveled and for those of you that are local, we appreciate you. My dad had many talents. He was creative, a musical inspiration, a passionate historian, and an exceptional writer. My dad had a way with words. He could invoke strong feelings to any willing listener, both through a series of complex, thought-provoking, poetic words, or through a simple phrase. My dad and I had a special bond. One of the ways that we connected was through writing. We used to write letters to each other, back and forth, essentially communicating how much we loved and admired one another. Our connection through writing started very early in our relationship, when my mother and he were dating. I was probably 7 years old, and I was homesick for several days with the flu, and he came over to the house simply to bring me a teddy bear to help me feel better. But it wasn't just a stuffed animal that he brought. He had taken the time to write a story, the story of Rupert T. Bear, to be exact. His creativity, and more importantly, thoughtfulness, had me feeling loved and supported, and I barely even knew him yet. As life progressed, we continued to bond over writing. We would spend a lot of late nights together as he helped me learn the craft of the written word. We wrote school papers together, speeches, poems. With his help, I learned how to express myself through language. As I honed my own skill of writing, we began to occasionally communicate through letter form. Excuse me. He would write me a letter for a special occasion of some sort, a birthday, bat mitzvah, graduation, and I would reciprocate at the next special occasion. In these letters, my dad would share his wisdom so as to prepare me for the life ahead, and he would also give me the most amazing compliments. He would reinforce his encouragement of me over and over again. I didn't realize at the time, but he was laying the foundation of my self-worth, my confidence, and my ability to succeed. I needed. Dad was always didn't realize he was equipping me with tools to be happy. I decided to dig through some old letters the day I learned of my dad's passing. One I found was from 2012. He sent a note 6 years ago to say that he had taken time for contemplation, and he realized that many of his compliments he had given me through the years seemed to be in reaction to photographs and essentially centered on external beauty. He then went on to communicate his pride and give me praise for my ability to land a good job, pride for my dedication, my accomplishments, my intellect, and so on. Instead of read from that letter, because it's a lot of Dina gushing, I thought I would take this opportunity instead to share what I said in response to him 6 years ago. Hi, Dad. First of all, I want to thank you for your very kind words. I genuinely appreciate all of the wonderful compliments. I must tell you, from my perspective, your compliments have always been extremely well-rounded and flattering. In fact, I believe that having you provide so many affirmations to us while we were growing up has greatly attributed to making us strong, confident, able-minded women that we are today. You're most definitely the cause of us being such accomplished women. It's my turn to give you praise, Dad, and the compliments that you deserve. You were and continue to be such a great father. You have always demonstrated how much you love and appreciate having us in your life. That has meant so much for our development as people in this world. You are such a caring, genuine person. You're also extremely intelligent. You've always been such a rational figure in our lives. And your passion is something I've always admired. Growing up, your passion for music, for example, was always so evident. It was such a good influence to have in our lives. It showed us that it's important to pursue things in your life that you care about, which both of us have, as you pointed out. That is certainly in part to our upraising. Thank you to you and Mom. So please know that while we've received many great compliments from you regarding our looks, which will never get old, by the way, you have also enriched our lives with so much more than that. You instilled confidence in us that we continue to carry with us today. You've made us better people. Thank you. Love you, Dad. Love you, Dina. On Sunday, upon hearing that my father passed, one of my first thoughts as I glanced at my 5-month-old daughter, who's being really good over there, is that Sophia won't have the luxury of knowing her grandfather. I thought, how sad is it that Sophia will never know the man that made me who I am today? That evening, as I fingered through old letters and stories that he wrote, I realized that she will, in fact, know him. She'll know him through his written words, through the pictures I'll share, and she'll know him through me. I will commit to give my daughter and my son, who's 4, Theo, the endless encouragement that he gave me. I will make sure they feel loved always, like he did for me. And I'll teach them, as he taught me in a letter for my 20th birthday 15 years ago, that, quote, growing and learning from your mistakes is a lifelong process, and if you choose to make good decisions, you can navigate any treacherous waters that lie ahead. I have to note that the very next line of that letter said, quote, At the risk of sounding too much like Oprah Winfrey, you go, girl. So we certainly can't fault him for being cheesy from time to time. Anyway, I will continue to commit to sharing his words and wisdom with my children as they grow, starting with the story of Rupert T. Bear. Thank you all for being here. I'm standing here today to pay tribute to my father, who was an exceptional man. For those of you who don't know, my dad met my mom when I was 7 years old. Actually, my mom had 3 kids at the time: my brother Dan, my twin sister Dina, and myself. Most men would have turned the other way, but not my dad. Nope. My dad saw 3 kids as a positive thing, and as just another reason why he should be with my mom. My dad loved my mom deeply and unwaveringly. He loved us all that way, right from the start. And we loved him right back. I remember begging my mom to marry him so that he could be our dad. And this was like recently after they started dating. The whole Lurie family has been amazing and accepted us into the family with no reservation. I have so many fond memories growing up in the Lurie household, from Passover dinners to summertime fun. When my parents met, I was struggling at school. I had lost my biological father when I was almost 3 years old, so I struggled emotionally, socially, and academically. But after my dad got in the picture, all that stuff seemed to work itself out. From the start, he always made us feel loved and respected. Every time I would just walk into a room with him, he had like 5 compliments for me. He would tell me how beautiful I am, how smart I am, how sweet I am, how well I did in my basketball game. He helped me become the self-assured, confident woman I am today. He helped me learn. He always took the time to help me with my homework. And I don't mean help me with my homework. He would spend hours with me before a social studies test, telling me elaborate, detailed, interesting stories about our history, making it easy for me to pass the test with flying colors. He was such a great storyteller, a great writer, a great musician, a great lawyer, a great father, husband, and friend. He had a great sense of humor, some of which I didn't always get when I was a kid. I just knew all the adults were in the room and were always laughing really hard. My dad was a people person. He was so compassionate and was an advocate for others. He always assumed the best in people, which is a value that I acquired from him and I will continue to instill in my children. He and my mom had my little brother, David, when I was 10 years old. David has brought so much joy to our family, especially my father. Luckily, David acquired the best qualities of my dad, so our dad will live on through him and through all of us. I have fond memories of playing red light, green light with my dad in the yard. He took us on vacations, mountain climbing, whitewater rafting, spending quality family time. He was a family man. He instilled the importance of everyone sitting at the dinner table talking about our days. It was at the dinner table where I acquired my vast vocabulary. My dad had a profound vocabulary, and he always told us, if we don't know a word that he used, just ask. So we did. My dad was a family man. He was the dad cheering the loudest at my sports events. I'm talking embarrassingly loud. But he was just so proud of us, he could not contain his enthusiasm. He was the pianist at my sister's choir performances. He was a writer. He wrote music. He wrote books. He had so many talents. But he would tell you that his greatest accomplishment of all was being our dad. It hasn't been easy watching his health regress over the years, making him physically incapable of doing the things that he loved the most. But he always handled himself with grace and positivity, always pointing out the bright side of things. He helped me learn and grow in so many ways. I know I would not be the person I am today without his influence, and I am forever grateful for him and my mom. My dad used to reminisce about a memory we shared a long time ago when I was just a kid, before my parents were married. My dad, mom, brother, sister, and I were walking side by side, hand in hand, and I noticed our shadow. I said, "Hey, look, we look like a family." He would recall this memory in adoration, thanking me for saying that. Well, Dad, I want to take this time to thank you for making me feel that and for making our family whole. I will forever cherish our memories I love you, Dad.
Thank you all for such magnificent tributes to a very special man. The family has asked that I share with you that they will be receiving friends at Jeff's mom's home, at Barbara Lurie's home at 2400 Bryan Drive in Beechwood, following our service of internment today until 8, and tomorrow and Thursday from 2 to 4 and from 7 to 9. And those who wish to memorialize Jeff's memory may contribute to the Multiple Sclerosis Society Buckeye Chapter, 6155 Rockside Road, Independence, Ohio. Oh God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures as you, O Lord, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. Please rise. מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומי, אמצעי מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטהורים, כי זו רקיע מזהירים את נשמת אברהם בן יוסף ובלה שהלך לעולמו. בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרו החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Jeffrey Keith Lurie, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.